Chosen one, listen very carefully. This moment is not random, and this video did not find you by accident. If you're here right now, understand this. Something powerful has been activated around you. Forces you were never meant to see are watching closely, because your presence is disrupting systems that were built in secrecy. You didn't plan this, and you didn't ask for it, but your awakening has triggered attention you can't ignore anymore. Every struggle you endured, every night you questioned yourself, every time you felt isolated or misunderstood, it was all preparing you for this exact phase. What they tried to suppress in you has only grown stronger. What they hoped would silence you has become impossible to contain. You may have felt resistance increasing lately, strange delays, sudden opposition, subtle pressure to doubt yourself. That's not coincidence. That's reaction. Because when someone chosen starts standing in truth, hidden structures begin to shake. We're tested, underestimated, and pushed aside, but each time you rose with more clarity, more awareness, and more inner authority. This isn't about fame or power. This is about frequency. Your energy no longer aligns with manipulation, fear, or control, and that alone is enough to disrupt an entire system built on secrecy. They can feel it. They know something has shifted, and whether you realize it fully or not, your presence alone is exposing what was never meant to be questioned. This is why doors are opening and closing at the same time. This is why your intuition feels louder. This is why silence around you feels charged. You're not imagining it. The moment has arrived. What you've been waiting for internally has already begun externally. The shift is active. The signal has been sent. Before you go any further into this message, you must align yourself fully. First, like this video to lock in your intention. Then, leave a comment saying, "Thank you, God, for choosing me." And finally, subscribe to the channel, because by doing so, you're declaring to the universe that you're ready to receive what was hidden, what was delayed, and what is now unfolding. Stay with me, because what comes next explains why they can't stand you and why their system is already cracking. Your awareness is the real threat, not your actions. Your awareness is the real threat, not your actions. You don't need to argue with anyone, prove anything, or expose secrets loudly to cause a shift. What truly disrupts hidden systems is the moment you start seeing clearly. Awareness changes everything. Once you notice patterns, you can't unsee them. You begin to understand how certain ideas are repeated to control fear, how opinions are shaped to guide behavior, and how silence is often encouraged to maintain comfort. You no longer accept things just because they are popular or widely believed. You pause, you think, and that pause alone removes you from automatic control. Before, emotions may have guided your reactions. Anger, fear, guilt, or excitement may have pushed you to respond quickly. But now, something is different. You observe first. You listen more. You don't jump into every argument or explanation. This calm awareness gives you space to choose instead of react. And when someone can no longer predict your reactions, they lose influence over you. Systems built on obedience rely on emotional triggers. Once those triggers stop working, the system weakens. You don't follow just because others are walking in the same direction. You ask yourself, does this make sense to me? You trust your own understanding instead of borrowed opinions. This doesn't make you rebellious, it makes you independent. And independence is uncomfortable for systems that depend on agreement without questioning. You're not loud, but your silence carries confidence. You're not aggressive, but your clarity speaks louder than noise. What makes this awareness powerful is that it doesn't seek attention. You don't announce what you've realized. You don't try to wake others up forcefully. You simply live differently. You choose peace over drama, truth over convenience, depth over surface-level comfort. And that quiet shift creates tension for people and structures that depend on people staying unaware. When someone sees clearly, manipulation becomes obvious. Fear loses its grip. Pressure stops working. You also notice that you don't feel the need to convince others anymore. You understand that everyone wakes up in their own time. This patience is strength. It shows that you're no longer driven by urgency or fear. You're grounded, you're steady, and steady people are hard to control. Awareness brings calm, and calm brings power. This is why awareness is more threatening than action. Action can be opposed, words can be argued against, but awareness changes how you move, how you choose, and how you respond. It quietly removes you from systems that rely on unconscious participation. You don't fight the system, you stop feeding it. And when enough people stop feeding something built on illusion, it begins to weaken on its own. Your clarity is not dangerous because it attacks. It's dangerous because it frees. And once someone tastes freedom of thought, they can never truly be controlled again. You can't be programmed anymore. You can't be programmed anymore. And that is one of the biggest shifts in your life. There was a time when fear easily controlled your decisions. Worry about the future, fear of loss, or fear of being judged could push you to act against your own peace. But something changed. Fear no longer has the same power over you. You still notice it, but it doesn't drive you. You pause, think, and choose calmly. That pause breaks the pattern that control depends on. Guilt also stopped working the way it used to. You no longer feel responsible for fixing everyone, pleasing everyone, or carrying emotional weight that was never yours. You understand now that guilt is often used to keep people stuck. When you released that weight, you felt lighter. You stopped explaining yourself so much. You stopped apologizing for being honest. That freedom makes you harder to manipulate. Even praise no longer controls you. Compliments used to feel like validation you needed to keep going. Now you appreciate them without chasing them. You don't change yourself to be liked. You don't perform to be accepted. When praise loses its grip, control loses one of its strongest tools. Systems depend on reward and punishment, approval and rejection. When neither moves you, you become unmanageable in the best way. You no longer move based on pressure. Urgency doesn't rush you. Expectations don't trap you. You don't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. You move when something feels right, not when someone demands it. This makes you unpredictable, not in a chaotic way, but in a grounded one. You respond from clarity, not conditioning. You also choose peace more often than chaos. Where you once engaged in arguments, you now choose silence. Where you once defended yourself, you now let actions speak. Silence isn't weakness for you anymore. It's confidence. You understand that not every fight deserves your energy. This calm confuses people who expect reactions, and confusion breaks control. Truth matters to you more than comfort now. You'd rather face reality than live in a lie that feels safe. This honesty with yourself shapes your decisions. You walk away from situations that don't align, even if staying would be easier. Comfort once kept people trapped, but you stepped out of that trap. Because of all this, resistance shows up, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're no longer predictable. Control systems rely on habits, reactions, and emotional hooks. When those stop working, pressure increases. But that pressure is proof that the old methods can't reach you anymore. You're not rebellious. You're aware. You're not cold. You're centered. And once someone is centered, programming loses its power. You don't need to fight control. You've simply outgrown it. Your energy exposes without confrontation. Your energy exposes without confrontation. And that's something many people don't understand at first. You're not accusing anyone. You're not calling people out. You're not trying to prove who is right or wrong. Yet, somehow, the truth still comes out around you. People begin to talk more than they should. Stories change. Small details don't match anymore. What was hidden starts to show itself, without you doing anything at all. This happens because your energy is calm and steady. You're not reactive, and you're not emotionally chaotic. You're present. When someone stands in honesty, even quietly, dishonesty feels uncomfortable nearby. People who are pretending feel pressure, not because you apply it, but because truth creates its own weight. You don't need force. You don't need confrontation. Your presence alone is enough. You've probably noticed that when you walk into a room, the mood sometimes shifts. Conversations pause. The tone changes. It's not because you're intimidating, it's because you're real. People sense that they can't fake things easily around you. Masks feel heavier. Pretending feels tiring. So some people become quiet, while others start over-explaining. Both reactions are signs of exposure. You also don't rush to fill silence anymore. You're comfortable letting moments breathe. Silence used to feel awkward, but now it feels powerful. When you stop talking, others talk more. And in doing so, they reveal their intentions, their fears, and sometimes their lies. You learn more by listening than you ever did by arguing. This kind of awareness makes truth surface naturally. What's important is that you don't enjoy exposing anyone. There's no ego in it. You're not looking for flaws or weaknesses. You're simply being yourself. That's why this kind of exposure is clean. It doesn't come from judgment. It comes from alignment. When you're aligned with truth, anything false nearby starts to feel unstable. You've also learned that authenticity doesn't need defense. You don't need to explain who you are or why you move the way you do. You trust yourself. That trust creates inner stability, and stable energy is hard to manipulate. People can sense when someone isn't seeking approval or control. That's why they either respect you or feel uneasy around you. This is also why arguments lose meaning for you. You understand that truth doesn't need to win debates. It reveals itself over time. You let behavior speak louder than words. You let patterns tell their own story. This patience allows reality to unfold without force. Your energy doesn't expose because it attacks. It exposes because it stands firm. Presence replaces pressure. Calm replaces chaos. And honesty quietly dissolves deception. You don't shake rooms by being loud. You do it by being real. You walked away from invisible contracts. You walked away from invisible contracts that most people don't even realize they've agreed to. These contracts aren't written on paper, but they shape how people live. They sound like unspoken rules. Stay quiet to stay accepted. Agree to avoid conflict. Lower yourself to stay safe. For a long time, many people follow these rules without questioning them. But you didn't. Or if you once did, you quietly chose to step away. At some point, you noticed how often fear was used to keep people loyal. Fear of losing relationships, fear of being judged, fear of being excluded. You saw how silence was rewarded and honesty was discouraged. Instead of fighting this system, you simply stopped participating in it. You stopped nodding along when something felt wrong. You stopped saying yes when your inner voice said no. That decision changed everything. You also realized that belonging isn't real if it requires you to shrink. You understood that being accepted at the cost of your values is not connection, it's control. So you chose integrity. You chose to stand with yourself, even if it meant standing alone for a while. That choice takes courage, because walking away from these invisible agreements often comes with discomfort and misunderstanding. What makes your decision powerful is that you didn't rebel loudly. You didn't attack anyone or burn bridges out of anger. You simply withdrew your consent. You stopped giving energy to expectations that drained you. You stopped playing roles that didn't fit who you truly are. And when someone stops participating quietly, systems built on silent cooperation begin to weaken. You may have noticed that people reacted when you changed. Some tried to guilt you back into old patterns. Others questioned your loyalty or intentions. This happens because when one person steps out, it highlights the chains others are still wearing. Your withdrawal didn't just affect you, it made others aware of what they've been tolerating. You also learned that safety built on compromise is fragile. True safety comes from alignment, not obedience. When you stopped compromising your values to keep peace, you gained something deeper: self-respect. That self-respect became a foundation. You no longer needed external approval to feel secure. You became grounded within yourself. Walking away from these contracts didn't make you cold or distant. It made you honest. You became clearer about where you belong and where you don't. You learned to choose relationships that allow truth, not ones that demand silence. That clarity brought peace, even when it came with loss. By withdrawing your consent, you didn't create chaos. You created freedom. You showed that power doesn't always look like resistance. Sometimes it looks like refusal. A quiet, steady refusal to betray yourself. And that kind of power is impossible to control because it comes from within. You're no longer driven by ego or revenge. You're no longer driven by ego or revenge. And that change has shifted how you move through life. There was a time when proving yourself felt important. Being right mattered. Getting the last word seemed necessary. But now, that urgency is gone. You don't feel the need to defend your worth or correct every misunderstanding. You know who you are, and that inner knowing keeps you steady. Anger doesn't control you the way it once might have. You still feel emotions, but you don't act from them. You let feelings pass without letting them decide your next move. This self-control is strength, not weakness. When someone expects you to react emotionally and you don't, it throws off their expectations. They lose the ability to predict you. You also don't seek revenge. You understand that revenge ties you to the past, and you've already moved beyond it. Holding on to resentment feels heavy, and you've chosen lightness instead. Rather than trying to settle scores, you focus on building peace. This choice frees your energy and keeps your mind clear. Validation no longer drives you either. Compliments don't inflate you, and criticism doesn't crush you. You don't shape your choices around being liked or admired. You act from values, not applause. This balance makes you stable, and stability is hard to manipulate. When praise and blame stop controlling someone, external influence weakens. You've also let go of the need to win. You understand that life isn't a constant competition. Not every disagreement needs a victory. Sometimes walking away is the smartest move. You choose progress over pride. This maturity allows you to conserve energy for what truly matters. You're calmer now, and that calm creates distance from drama. Situations that once pulled you into emotional storms no longer interest you. You don't feed chaos with reactions. You don't chase conflict. Instead, you observe, decide, and move on. This detachment confuses people who rely on emotional responses to maintain control. Because you can't be provoked easily, you can't be steered. Control systems depend on triggering anger, fear, or pride. When those triggers fail, the system loses leverage. Your calm becomes disruptive, not because it attacks, but because it refuses to participate. This emotional maturity didn't happen overnight. It came from experience, reflection, and growth. You've learned what drains you and what strengthens you. You've chosen peace without becoming passive. You've chosen strength without aggression. Your intuition overrides external authority. Your intuition now overrides external authority, and this has changed the way you experience the world. You still listen to advice. You still learn from others. You still observe what's happening around you, but you no longer hand over your inner power to anyone else. You trust yourself enough to pause before accepting something as truth. That pause is where your freedom lives. When something feels off, you don't ignore it anymore. You don't push the feeling away just to stay comfortable or accepted. You stop and reflect. You give yourself time to sense what's really going on beneath the surface. This doesn't make you suspicious. It makes you aware. Awareness allows you to move wisely instead of quickly. When something feels true, you allow yourself to trust it. You don't need permission to believe what your inner voice recognizes. You've learned that intuition isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet and steady. It doesn't shout. It nudges. And over time, you've learned the difference between fear-based thoughts and intuitive clarity. That difference has become your guide. You also understand that authority doesn't always equal truth. Titles, status, and confidence don't impress you the way they once did. You respect experience, but you don't surrender discernment. You take in information and then check it against your own understanding. This balanced approach keeps you grounded and independent. What makes this powerful is that you don't reject everything. You're not closed off or rebellious. You're selective. You know how to separate wisdom from noise. You don't blindly accept, and you don't blindly dismiss. You weigh things carefully. This discernment protects you from manipulation and confusion. You've also learned to sit with uncertainty. You don't rush to conclusions just to feel secure. You allow answers to unfold. This patience keeps you from being pushed into decisions that aren't right for you. Systems that rely on urgency lose power over people who can wait and think. Because of this inner authority, pressure affects you less. Fear tactics don't work the same way. Guilt doesn't pull you off course. You feel steady even when others are panicking. This calm independence is unsettling to systems that demand obedience because obedience requires surrender, and you no longer surrender yourself. Your intuition doesn't isolate you, it aligns you. It helps you choose the right people, the right timing, and the right direction. It keeps you honest with yourself. And honesty builds confidence that no external voice can override. Discernment is freedom because it allows you to choose truth consciously. You're not controlled by force or fear. You're guided by understanding. And once someone learns to trust their inner compass, no authority can fully own their mind again. You influence without trying to lead. You influence without trying to lead. And that's what makes your presence powerful. You don't announce yourself. You don't try to take charge. You don't push your opinions onto others. Yet people notice you. Even in silence, Your energy stands out. There's something steady about you, something grounded that others can feel. The moment they're around you, some people feel inspired by this. They feel calmer, more confident, more honest with themselves. Your presence reminds them that they don't need to perform or pretend. Others, however, feel exposed, not because you judge them, but because alignment highlights what's out of balance. When someone lives authentically, it naturally reflects what others are avoiding. This contrast can be uncomfortable, but it's also revealing. You don't preach or explain yourself constantly. You let your way of living speak. You don't give long lectures or demand agreement. You listen more than you talk. And when you do speak, your words carry weight because they come from clarity, not ego. People pay attention because your words feel real, not rehearsed. You also don't command attention, yet it finds you. This kind of influence doesn't come from titles or authority. It comes from alignment, when your thoughts, actions, and values match. People sense that consistency. They trust it, and trust creates influence without force. What makes alignment powerful is that it can't be controlled or owned. It doesn't fit into rigid systems or ranks. You can't fake it, and you can't buy it. That's why systems built on hierarchy feel uneasy around you. They rely on positions, labels, and chains of command. But alignment doesn't answer to rank. It answers to truth. You don't try to gather followers, yet people observe you closely. They watch how you handle stress, how you respond to pressure, how you stay calm without becoming cold. This quiet example teaches more than instructions ever could. You show that leadership doesn't require dominance. It requires integrity. You also give others space to be themselves. You don't control conversations or redirect attention to yourself. This openness makes people feel seen and heard. And when people feel safe, they reflect more honestly. That reflection is where growth begins. Because you don't chase influence, it stays clean. It's not mixed with ego or ambition. It's steady and natural. This purity makes it unsettling to systems that depend on control. They can't predict you. They can't rank you. They can't own what you represent. You don't need a stage to lead. Your alignment does the work quietly. And that quiet influence changes rooms, conversations, and lives without ever needing permission. You're aligned with truth, not timelines. You're aligned with truth, not timelines. And this has changed how you move through life. You're no longer rushing to reach certain milestones just because others say you should. You've learned that speed doesn't always mean progress. Instead of panicking about delays, you see them as moments of alignment. You understand that not everything arrives on a schedule, and that forcing timing often leads to mistakes. You no longer feel pressured by deadlines that don't belong to you. Expectations that once made you anxious now feel distant. You trust that what's meant for you will arrive when you're ready to handle it, not just when you want it. This trust brings calm, and calm thinking leads to better choices. Because you're not afraid of waiting, fear tactics don't work on you anymore. No one can rush you by creating urgency or panic. You don't respond to threats of missing out or running out of time. You pause. You evaluate. You listen to your inner sense instead of external pressure. This patience removes leverage from anyone trying to control your decisions. You've learned that manipulation often hides inside urgency. When people rush others, they limit time for reflection. But you don't fall for that anymore. You take your time. You ask questions. You wait until things feel right. This patience protects you from being cornered into choices that don't align with your truth. You also understand that delays aren't punishment. Sometimes they're protection. Sometimes they're preparation. Instead of seeing a pause as failure, you see it as space to grow stronger, wiser, and more grounded. This mindset keeps you steady, even when others are rushing around you. You move when it's right, not when you're pushed. Your decisions come from clarity, not fear. You trust your sense of timing more than loud opinions. This doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're intentional. When you act, your actions are strong because they're aligned. This kind of timing is difficult to manipulate. Control depends on panic and urgency. But when someone stays calm and grounded, pressure loses its power. You can't be hurried into something that doesn't feel right. You can't be scared into abandoning your values. You can't be stopped because you're not forcing anything. You can't be stopped because you're not forcing anything. And that's where your strength comes from. You're not trying to break systems, challenge authority, or prove a point. You're not exposing secrets or trying to wake people up before they're ready. You're simply living honestly. And living in truth creates change in a way that force never can. You've learned that pushing against things often gives them more power. When people fight systems aggressively, those systems tighten their grip. But when someone quietly stops feeding them energy, the system weakens on its own. You no longer invest attention in what drains you. You don't argue with illusions. You don't chase validation from structures that were never built for truth. Your calm presence speaks louder than protest. You don't need drama to be effective. You don't need chaos to create movement. Instead, you bring clarity wherever you go. Clarity dissolves confusion naturally. When truth stands nearby, falsehood feels unstable. There's nothing to attack. Illusion collapses when it's no longer believed. You've also learned the power of boundaries. You don't over-explain. You don't overgive. You don't stay in spaces that require you to compromise your values. These boundaries aren't walls. They're filters. They allow what aligns to stay and what doesn't to fall away. Over time, this creates a life that feels clean and honest. Your faith is quiet but steady. You don't need to announce it. You don't need constant reassurance. You trust the process, even when you can't see the outcome yet. This trust keeps you grounded during uncertainty. When others panic or force outcomes, you stay centered. That calm becomes your protection. Nothing in your life needs to explode for change to happen. You're not waiting for dramatic moments or loud victories. You understand that real transformation is subtle. It happens in choices, habits, and the way you treat yourself and others. This steady approach builds lasting change. What's built on illusion depends on constant attention and belief. When you stop feeding it, it weakens. You don't need to fight lies. You simply refuse to live in them. That refusal is powerful because it's consistent and peaceful. You're unstoppable because you're aligned, not aggressive. You move with truth, not pressure. And truth doesn't need force to win. It only needs space to stand. Chosen one, this isn't about fear or enemies. It's about alignment. You're not here to fight shadows. You're here to live so clearly that shadows lose relevance. Stay grounded, stay aware, stay peaceful. The fact that you're still standing, still calm, and still moving forward is proof enough that whatever was hidden cannot hold power over you anymore.